Now, for more on sustainable cities, let's bring in Stephen Wheeler. He's a professor in the Department of Human Ecology at the University of California at Davis. Thanks very much for your time there, Stephen. Could you just tell us a little bit about the long-term environmental, social, economic benefits of cities like Vancouver that are implementing sustainable measures?
Well, there are huge benefits to the people who live there, just in terms of having a more livable city, but also, of course, business, saving money for the local governments, for the regional governments, and building a sense of stewardship of the place that they inhabit. Those are all some long-term benefits.
And aside from Vancouver, what are some other cities around the world that are successfully instilling greener infrastructure?
Well, in the U.S., Portland, Oregon always gets a lot of press. They've been doing it since the 1960s. In Europe, Copenhagen, Stockholm, Freiburg, Germany, quite a few others have done many good things. But you look almost everywhere, and there's some things that are being done well that other places can learn from. Melbourne, Australia is doing some good things. Japanese cities, and I know China also has many ecological city ambitions.
So can you tell us about these good things? You're talking about some of the successful cities, but what is it that these cities are doing that is so successful?
Well, the number one need is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and get to a fossil-free status. And everybody is struggling with that, and Vancouver is too. Vancouver is reducing the greenhouse gas emissions per capita, but the population is growing, so overall emissions are growing too. Beyond that, social equity has got to be a very big need most places, because we have very unequal societies and major problems with affordable housing and things like that. So that is something cities everywhere are working on. Handling resources, energy, moving to local energy systems and perhaps more decentralized energy systems, toward what we call circular resource loops, where we don't have waste, we have reuse. So
sorry, just to interrupt, if you could just give me some examples of some of the things these cities are actually putting in place for people's daily lives. Is it creating more bike lanes? Is it creating more high-rise buildings so that they're condensing living spaces, more greener spaces? Can I get some examples about what these cities are doing?
Sure. Well, back to Vancouver. Since the 1970s, Vancouver has had a whole series of regional plans done not just for the city of Vancouver, but for the whole metro region, that developed a green space network of parks and walkways along the waterfront and wildlife corridors that connected to one another. And that has major benefits for people's daily life. They can get outdoors easily. Also for the ecosystems, they have a more viable habitat for species.
So on a sort of fairly basic level, what can governments do, particularly in the developing world, to build a more sustainable environment within their cities?
Probably the first thing is to go all electric, to require any new building that's being built to not use fossil fuels, to have electric heat pumps for heating and cooling, electric hot water heaters, electric stoves, and then to generate the electricity renewably through wind, through solar, through geothermal, through various other means. Then there is a challenge, as your previous person commented, to retrofit existing buildings. But you can require that that be done at time of sale, or there can be incentives for doing so. Of course, electrifying transportation as well. So in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, those are some of the top steps.
And there is some school of thought that sustainability is for the privileged. Is it unrealistic to expect governments in impoverished nations to implement sustainable practices and infrastructure when they have more pressing concerns like how to feed their people?
Well, it all has to happen at the same time, and we can actually save money by doing things sustainably. That being said, there's a challenge sometimes in coming up with a capital up front, and developed nations, and particularly the United States, but others, do have a responsibility that has been acknowledged globally to help, and have not yet put up the money for that. They will need to. But building homes from scratch that don't use fossil fuels is a way to save money, and it doesn't have to cost any extra upfront. Renewables have become so cheap, it can totally be done with no increase.
Very interesting to have you on. Thank you very much for that. Stephen Wheeler there for us, Professor in Human Ecology at the University of California, Davis.